Hello, hello. My name is Kate Binford, and I wanted to study more about group social work. And I wanted to do this, it caught my eye, because I've always kind of thought about group therapy as like how we see it in movies with like Fault in Our Stars or Wreck-It Ralph, where they kind of just like sit in a circle and tell everybody their problems. Um, but I worked at the MTC last year and I was an infield mentor and I got to work with missionaries over Zoom and we would work with all the new missionaries that were coming into each mission and we'd meet together in a group setting and it was really cool to see how much they could learn from each other and I was just the facilitator to ask them questions and it seemed like they found a lot of peace from seeing that they were not the only ones feeling the way they did. And so I'm kind of intrigued to learn more about group therapy in a more clinical setting. Um, the articles that I found, well, I was also interested in it because the name Grace Coyle stood out to me as I was doing the reading. And I kind of wanted to figure out where social work came or group social work came from. And it goes way back to the 1900s. The first kind of documented group therapy that they had was at the Hull House. And there was a group of youth age drug addicts that were meeting at the Hull House and trying to recover together. And then it's just evolved since then, um, with having a lot of therapy at veterans hospitals and group therapy for helping emotionally disturbed children through play therapy. So I just thought that was interesting. Those are kind of the roots of group social work. Um, so the news article that I found um, is called To Improve Students' Mental Health, Schools Take a Team Approach. And I really liked this article. It kind of took a new spin on what group social work or group therapy looks like. Um, and since COVID, a lot of schools, primarily on the East Coast and in California, have adopted a program called CREW, and they take their what would be their homeroom class and they turn it into sort of group therapy every day. They sit around with I think it says 8 to 10 teenage and preteen students and they help them learn more about their emotions and how they can deal with stress and successfully cope with these feelings that they're having. And they saw a much greater need for it after COVID as the adults in these schools became aware that there were many of the children there really struggling with their mental health, and they saw a lot more emergencies because of that. Um, it's cool because they talked a lot about how it's the relationships that the children gain with each other is what really help them. There was this story about this girl named Keely, and she really struggled with depression. Um, and they talked about how she wasn't like the girl to just sit in the corner, but she was actually a leader within the school. And so, as she was able to share her experiences openly with the other kids in the school through this CREW program that they started, it really helped her and it helped the other kids to feel like they weren't alone as well. So I thought that article was really cool to see um, how group social work is spreading. Many schools in the country are doing this now, and they're really using it to emphasize mental health and normalizing mental health and mental illness to help kids get the resources that they need. Um, the other source that I found, let's see if my computer will let me change here. Hmm. Okay, there we go. Um, Here we are. Okay, so this was a study that was done about group social work. And what they looked into was different methods that cohesion could be measured within group therapy, and if group cohesion changed over time as these groups met together more, and how that affected the effectiveness of group therapy. And I found it very interesting because it talked about how there was it the the levels of cohesion within these groups was affected by how much variety was in the groups and how willing people were to share. And there are many different variables, like if the group leader affects how much engagement there is, and many different things like that. Yeah, it was a little bit confusing because there's all these different variables. But within the discussion, they shared how they have developed a 3-level location scale, and this helps them to have a better understanding about group therapy and if it should keep happening clinically, and help the clinicians to better facilitate group therapy. And within the code of ethics, oh, it says my screen sharing is paused. Okay. I guess I'll just tell you. So in the code of ethics, the part that stood out to me, that applied to this was the value that says importance of human relationships. And the ethical principle is that social workers recognize the central importance of human relationships. And it says social workers understand that relationships between and among people are an important vehicle for change. Social workers engage people as partners in the helping process. Social workers seek to strengthen relationships among people in a purposeful effort to promote, restore, maintain, and enhance the well-being of individuals, families, social groups, organizations, and communities. And I feel like this applies really well because in group therapy, you discuss many different topics that help to bring about change as you learn from one another and are able to feel that you are not alone in the struggles that you are facing. Some of the similarities between these two articles that I found were interesting is that in the New York Times article, it talks about how there was they did a study on the different levels of children. They rated how effective group therapy was for them. And about 7 out of 10 kids said they gave it a 9 or a 10. But then there was always a few that gave it like a 5 or a 6. But on the flip side, they would ask them like how cohesive their relationships were with their peers in that group, and they'd always give their peers a 9 or a 10. And so that kind of shows in contrast to the other article, for these children, it wasn't so much their peer relationships that made the program effective, but they did get closer to their peers because of it and kind of had more of a close relationship with those peers that they were associating with, kind of like in how the article talked about how the cohesive nature of group therapy is what can help it to be effective. So my question for you all is, what are the advantages you see with doing group therapy over individual therapy? And I'd love to hear what you think. And then these are my references. Yeah, thanks so much.